Hello, hello, it's Miss Shannon, and it's Literacy Week in our schools this week. And a couple years ago, I read some of my favorite books onto video and posted them onto our social media outlets. And I thought, I think I'd like to do it again. And I had, especially because I had bought some new books this year earlier in hopes of eventually creating a little bit of a library at the studio with some dance related books. And the theme this week for Literacy Week, they told me, was resiliency. And I feel like a couple of the books I may do this week will fall into that category. The one for today, I actually saw some videos of this young lady about her story and things like that a few years ago. And that's what kind of inspired me to buy her book whenever I saw it come out. But it's called She Kept Dancing. And it's the story of Sydney Mesher, and it's the true story of a professional dancer with a limb difference. And it was written by Sydney Mesher and Catherine Laudone. So she had some help. So let's read about Sydney's story. Sydney was born with 10 toes and 5 fingers. But it was her toes that Mom noticed first. I can tell she's going to be a dancer, Mom told Dad. And it turned out Mom was right. Before she even crawled, Sydney was twirling, swaying, and leaping around the house. When her parents saw how much joy dancing brought Sydney, they enrolled her in dance class. On her first day, Sydney was so excited, it felt like tap dancers were rat-a-tat-tatting through her whole body. But when she walked into the studio, some of the kids grew quiet. Others called her a monster when they saw she had one hand instead of two. Sydney's sadness was a slow dance with many turns and sweeping gestures. After class, she told Mom what had happened. Those kids have never met anyone with a limb difference before, Mom said. And sometimes people are unkind when they meet someone new or different. But don't let their mean words keep you from doing what you love. Keep dancing. So Sydney did. She kept dancing at the next class and the next and the next until her classmates finally started seeing her as just another dancer. But when Sydney walked into kindergarten for the first time, it was like the first day of dance class all over again. Sydney's heart slipped and fell to the floor. Will it always be like this? She wondered. But she remembered what Mom had told her, and so she picked her heart back up and kept dancing through the day. There she is in dance class, and there she is at school. A few months later, Sydney was offered the chance to try out a prosthetic hand. It attached to her arm, except she wouldn't be able to move the fingers. When she wore it, bullies started calling her the girl with the fake hand. Sydney did her best to ignore them. She wanted to make her decision based on what felt right to her and not what other people thought. After a few days, Sydney decided she felt more like herself without the prosthetic. Her self-confidence was a wild freestyle number. As Sydney grew older, dancing continued to be the one thing that always made her feel good about herself. No two dances were the same. Each one was beautiful because it was different. Just like how Sydney's body was beautiful because it was different. Sydney found that she could say more with her body than she ever could with words. She soaked up every tap, ballet, jazz, and hip hop lesson offered at her local studio. And when she ran out of dance classes to take, she enrolled in a performing arts high school where she learned new ways to swing, shake, stomp, flap, shuffle, flap, twist, and twirl. Sydney kept dancing all through high school, past graduation, and across state lines until she landed in New York City. On the way to her college dorm, she passed by Radio City Music Hall, where the famous Radio City Rockettes danced. The Rockettes were some of the best dancers in the world. Will I be good enough to dance there one day? Sydney wondered. She decided that she would practice even harder to make her wish of dancing on that stage come true. This one is this way. Sydney still saw people whispering and stealing glances at her when she walked into open auditions, but it only made her more determined to become the best dancer she could possibly be. No one would ever say that she had gotten a job dancing out of pity for her limb difference. All of Sydney's hard work paid off when she landed her first big job as one of the first ever women backup dancers for BTS, a popular South Korean boy band. She would perform with them for their one night only show in New York. As the concert began, her heart pounded a thunderous beat in her chest. Am I really good enough to be up here? She worried. What if I make a mistake in front of such a big audience? Sydney danced over her doubts and onto the stage. She kept dancing, and with each step, she became as powerful and as fierce as a lioness. Up there, she was no longer Sydney the dancer with a limb difference. She was just Sydney the dancer. And that was good enough for her. After that night, Sydney felt unstoppable, like a train going full speed. She kept dancing and dancing until she couldn't dance anymore. Having a broken foot was tough enough, but using crutches with only one hand was painful and sometimes nearly impossible. For the first time in her life, Sydney truly felt held back by her limb difference. Without dance, it felt like she had lost her voice. She didn't even know how to tell others just how sad and angry she felt. While she was recovering, Sydney began to notice movement in unexpected places, like on the city streets outside her windows. She saw people dashing, tugging, stopping, no, pausing, as if holding a pose in a group dance and waiting for the right beat to jump back in. That's when she realized that her injury was just a pause, an intermission. Hope leaped inside Sydney's heart. Her dancing days were far from over. After healing from her injury, Sydney graduated from college with a degree in dance. She started taking different jobs and was surprised to find some of them required her to model and act more than dance. She glided down the runway at New York City's Fashion Week and posed for photo shoots. She stepped at a music festival and starred in a commercial. With every new job, She hoped someone else with a limb difference would see her and know that their own body was beautiful too and worth celebrating. So there she is graduating. And there she is with some of her new jobs. Sydney's first love was dance, though, and she had a secret wish. She still wanted to be a Radio City Rockette, to dance with the best of the best in a grand theater. She'd auditioned for the Rockettes a few times over the years, but had never made the cut. But Sydney just had to try one more time. Walking into the audition, Sydney felt more confident than she had ever before. She didn't notice if anyone was staring or whispering. She was solely focused on giving the best performance of her life. When it was her turn, Sydney kicked high and kept her lines ruler straight. She swung her arms and shook her shoulders. She tapped, 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 and flap, flap, shuffle, flapped. Then she struck a pose and smiled, holding perfectly still. In that moment, Sydney's feelings of pure joy and pride shimmied from the top of her head all the way down to her long toes. No matter what the outcome, she knew she'd danced her best, and that was good enough for her. And this time, she did it! Sydney was the first Rockette in history with a visible disability. And people came from all over the world to watch her and the other Rockettes perform in the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. Dancing in the colorful costumes on the big stage under the dazzling lights was more wonderful than Sydney had ever dared to dream. And best of all, each show was an opportunity for Sydney to share her message of celebrating different body types using a language everyone could understand: dance. After the curtain fell at the end of each show, Sydney often met backstage with children from the audience who had limb differences of their own. Sydney always made sure to reassure them, saying, "You can do everything that you put your mind to." When everyone had left, Sydney would sometimes pause before heading home. She'd look out at the music hall, remembering the soaring music and running through the choreography again in her mind. "I still can't believe that I get to come to work here every day and do what I love," she would think. "I can't imagine what my life would be like if I hadn't kept dancing." Her joy was a mashup of dance styles, a pirouette twirling into a jazz swing before tapping into fast hip hop steps. It was one of a kind, just like her. And at the end of the book, there's a note from the actual girl, and there's a picture of what she looks like really when she was little, when she grew older. So, and this is what it looks like under the dust jacket. But again, this book was called She Kept Dancing. And yeah, I there's a lot of things she says in this that I agree with, because I feel the same way. I don't know where I would be, who I would be, what my life would be like if I hadn't kept dancing. And no, I don't have a limb disability. But I am, as everyone can see, I am a little bit more on the plus side. And the dance world growing up was not very accepting of girls that had a little more to love and to hug on their bodies. And we were very much told we would never, we could never be professional dancers because, the perfect ballerina, the perfect dancers were all very, very thin. And But as though even though I kind of kept switching my dreams around because I started out wanting to be a solid gold dancer. You'll have to ask your grandmothers what about that. Um, and then and I wanted to be a Disney dancer at one time, and um, but as I kind of accepted what society was saying, I found my love for teaching dance, and I was very grateful and thankful for the teachers that I had in my life because they encouraged me and they influenced me and mentored me and have continued supporting me to this day. And I consider myself like very blessed and very lucky that every day that I get to walk into our dance studio and for the dance family that I have created and or has created around me. And so yeah, I'm like her. Keep dancing, and or keep doing whatever it is you do. If dancing is not your thing, play your music, sing your songs, paint your pictures, um, build your cars. Don't if it's your dream, do it. I mean, maybe you can't always make money at it, but that doesn't mean it can't still make you happy. Sometimes we have to do the jobs that we don't care for so that we can do the things that we love. So, yeah, get out there and do what makes your heart happy. And, if it's farming, farm. And if it's teaching, teach. And if it's performing on a stage, perform and live every day your best. So, keep reading. I will try to record another one later or tomorrow, and I may try to repost the ones I did from a while. So again, our book today was She Kept Dancing. It's the true story of Sydney Mesher, and I'll see you next time.